Good morning. November 16, 2021 School Land Board meeting will now come to order. Pursuant to Section 31.015 of the Texas Natural Resources Code, I'm chairing this meeting in the Commissioner's absence as Chief Clerk of the General Land Office, as the Commissioner is away on state business. Should he return prior to the conclusion of this meeting, I will relinquish the chair to him. The November 16, 2021 meeting of the School Land Board is being held in person at 1700 North Congress Avenue, Stephen F. Austin Building, and by video conference call as authorized under Texas Government Code Section 551.125. Access to the meeting by members of the public was published in advance in the Texas Register in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Any member of the public who wishes to address the School Land Board should indicate so now or during any public comment period. I think we are good to go on that end. So the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the October 19, 2021 School Land Board meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve the minutes. Next item on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda.
It's Michael. I move to approve.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve. Where are we? Items number, okay, sorry, looks like items number 3 and 4 will be in executive session. So the School Land Board will enter into closed session pursuant to Chapter 551, Subchapter D, Texas Government Code, Section 551.071. Consultation with its attorneys regarding matters involving attorney-client privilege information and legal issues associated with items number 3 and 4. Following the closed session, the board will reconvene in open session to complete the docket. All right, the open session of November 16, 2021 special meeting of the School Land Board will resume with item number 3.
Good morning, Board. I'm Ken Mills, the Director of the Oil, Gas, and Energy Section in the Office of General Counsel. Staff recommends that the Board authorize GLO staff to propose for the Commissioner's signature Relinquishment Act mineral leases on a form containing terms and conditions that are substantially and materially consistent with the lease form as described in executive session. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Michael.
Motion is made, seconded, and carries unanimously to approve item number 3. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, for the record, Rusty Martin, Chief Investment Officer. Approval of this agenda item will constitute your approval of a co-investment by the General Land Office on behalf of the Permanent School Fund alongside Lime Rock Resources 5 LP through a newly created limited liability company co-investment vehicle called Capital Co-Investment 17 LLC. The Investment Advisory Committee recommends that TexGlo co-invest up to $125 million alongside Lime Rock 5 through Capital Co-Investment 17 LLC. Lime Rock Resources is a Houston-based private equity energy investor focused solely on acquiring and operating diverse upstream, onshore producing oil and gas assets located in most major U.S. hydrocarbon basins. Our relationship with Lime Rock began in 2008 and has since resulted in total original capital commitments of $415 million across 4 funds. Recently, Fund 5 offered us the opportunity to co-invest alongside it and other Lime Rock 5 LPs in an attractive package of producing U.S. upstream oil and gas assets. Investment management staff conducted due diligence on this co-investment opportunity through a review of the proposal and a series of discussions with the Lime Rock team. We also discussed the proposed opportunity with W.D. Von Gotten and Associates, who's an oil and gas consultant located in Houston. The team then made a detailed presentation to the IEC and the Townsend Group on November 10th, and following that presentation, the IEC voted unanimously to recommend the proposal to the school land board. In conjunction with this discussion, review, and analysis, investment management and the IEC have determined that the proposed co-investment fits within the framework of the TexGlobe PSF investment policy statement and is in the best interest of the permanent school fund. Therefore, the IEC is recommending the school land board approve a co-investment of up to $125 million in the proposed transaction alongside Lime Rock Resources 5 LP through a newly created limited liability company co-investment vehicle called Capital Co-Investments 17 LLC. And I also note that your approval of this transaction is contingent upon our successful completion of the negotiation and finalization of the legal documentation associated with the proposed transaction. And also the approval of this transaction also includes the authorization for the formation and activation of the limited liability company co-investment vehicle called Capital Co-Investment 17 LLC. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions from the board?
Motion to approve?
Motion to
I'm moving.
approve.
I'm moving. It's a compelling opportunity.
Agree.
All right, looks like we have a motion and a second. Motion is made, second, and carries unanimously to approve item number 4. Next item on the agenda is number 5, possible release funds from the RESFA account.
Mr. Chairman, members, again for the record, Rusty Martin, Chief Investment Officer. Approval of this item would constitute your approval of the release of funds from the Real Estate Special Fund account, or what I'll call the RESFA, to the Permanent School Fund liquid account for temporary investment by the State Board of Education until needed by TexGlobe to fund capital calls related to new and existing school land board investments in the RESFA. As you will recall, HB 4388 of the 86th regular session created the Permanent School Fund liquid account, and the main purpose to create the account was to provide for the temporary investment of State Board of Education of money in the RESFA committed by the school land board to 2 new and existing investments that were awaiting capital calls by the school land board's external investment managers. The bill gives the SBOE the authority to invest the money in liquid assets, to keep any investment income or realize capital gains from those assets, and to use the funds in the liquid account to pay for the administrative costs associated with managing the liquid account. In conjunction with the creation of the account, the school land board is required periodically to adopt a resolution to temporarily release money from the RESFA funds that are not required for the school land board's anticipated cash needs. If the school land board's cash needs subsequently exceed the amount available in the RESFA during the period, then the SBOE would be required to release an amount requested by the school land board within 5 business days of such request. On page 2 of your memo, you can see a history of the releases so far. The original release was $3.9 billion, and that was done on September 3rd of 2019. Since then, there have been a series of releases into the liquid account as well as a series of releases from the liquid account. The total right now is $4.18 billion. That's the total amount that has been released over this 2-year period. Of that $4.18 billion, about $2.7 billion of it is committed to investments by the school land board, and those investments have not yet been called by the associated investment managers. The SBOE has invested about $3.5 billion of the total amount released in a diversified portfolio of equity and fixed income securities, and currently the market value of those equities is $1.8 billion. The market value of the fixed income securities is $1.7 billion, and the remainder is held in cash at the state treasury. According to SBOE, since inception through September 30th, that account has returned 2.80%. The treasury yield on cash currently stands at an annualized 0.29%. As provided by HB 4388, SBOE has so far released approximately $156 million of income and realized gains from the liquid account to the permanent school fund. As you can see in the table at the bottom of the page, we're estimating that the school land board's cash needs for the next 90-day period is going to be approximately $577 million. There's currently $934 million being held in the RESFA. The reason that number is so high is because you will recall that we had a significant distribution a few weeks ago of over $400 million, mostly related to a co-investment that we had in the midstream space. We're estimating that approximately $405 million in revenue will be deposited into the RESFA during this period. Thus, we're estimating that the cash balance in the RESFA at the end of the next 90-day period would be approximately $762 million. The most recent market value of the portfolio is about $4.6 billion, and given our cash target of 5% of the market value, that would mean our current cash target is around $228 million. Given our projection of a $762 million balance at the end of the next quarter, the expected cash balance at the Treasury will exceed our cash target by approximately $534 million. Therefore, we're recommending that we release $500 million from the RESFA to the liquid account and retain the remainder to meet its anticipated cash needs during the period. We will, of course, continue to prepare and present new 90-day cash needs assessments and release recommendations on a periodic basis. Therefore, in accordance with the requirements of Section 51.414B of the Natural Resources Code, I'm recommending that the school land board release $500 million from the RESFA to the liquid account during the period November 16th to December 15th for investment by the State Board of Education in accordance with the provisions of Section 51.414 Natural Resources Code, and that we retain the amount remaining in the RESFA to meet the school land board's anticipated cash needs going forward. Happy to answer any questions.
Rusty, remind me of the $400 million distribution midstream. Where'd that come from?
So that was primarily, it was related to a sale by InCap Flat Rock of the Moda Midstream's
Moda. Okay.
Ingleside
Got it.
project down in Corpus Christi
Yeah.
to Enbridge.
Okay.
We were, the fund, one of the InCap funds was invested in that, the Flat Rock funds, as well as one of the InCap funds, and then we had a large co-investment in it. So the total distribution to us was about $435 million. So that's what drove that balance up so high, and that's why I'm recommending such a large release.
And I noticed on here, you said SBOE has released approximately $156 million from liquid account
Yeah.
to the PSF, and that's over what time frame since inception?
Since inception.
Okay.
Rusty, I apologize for forgetting my acronyms here. The $500 million that will go to the PSF LA is still cash that you can call, or it is now being permanently released for full investment by the SBOE within the greater SBOE fund?
So it's still technically money that we would call to fund future investments.
Okay.
That is until, of course, the transition goes into place at the end of next year, beginning with January 1st of 2023. The liquid account will effectively go away, and it will just become part of the overall investment portfolio in the permanent school fund.
Okay. I have no other questions.
Thank you, Todd.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Looks like there's a motion made, seconded, carries unanimously to approve item number 4. Item number 5. And it looks like the final item is number 6. This is a non-voting item, quarterly investment report.
Mr. Chairman, members, again, Rusty Martin, Chief Investment Officer. I'm pleased to present you with a quarterly investment report of the TexGlo Permanent School Fund investment portfolio for the period April 1st through June 30th of this year. The performance measurement calculations and the statistical data presented in the report were prepared by the State Street Bank and its private edge group, which are the custodial, accounting, and performance measurement agents for the portfolio. Briefly giving you an update on macroeconomic conditions. Second quarter GDP increased at an annual rate of 6.7%. That was following an increase of 6.3% in the first quarter. That increase reflected the continued economic recovery, reopening of business establishments, and continued government response related to the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, government assistance payments in the form of loans to businesses and grants to state and local governments increased during the period, while direct economic impact payments decreased. The U.S. unemployment rate ended the quarter at 5.9%. That was down slightly from 6% at the end of the first quarter. As far as the Fed is concerned, they basically left things unchanged. If you recall, in March of 2020, they decreased their target Fed funds range all the way down to a range of 0 to 0.25%. At their June meeting this year, they reiterated that they would leave that range in place and maintain that range until labor market conditions have reached levels consistent with the committee's assessments of maximum employment, and inflation has risen to 2% and is on track to moderately exceed 2% for some time. In addition, they reaffirmed the continuation of the balance sheet normalization program that they implemented in October of 2017. They also stated that they would continue monitoring the implications of incoming information for the economic outlook, including public health information, inflation pressures, and international developments, and would use tools as appropriate to support the economy. As far as the portfolio is concerned, the core U.S. commercial real estate market is measured by the Unlevered NCREIF Property Index, or NPI, returned 3.59% for the quarter ended June 30. The trailing one-year return was 7.37%. That increase in returns was attributable to improved performance across all property types, particularly the continuing strong performance of industrial warehouse properties. That sector returned 8.88% for the quarter, phenomenal return. And in fact, that was the highest return for industrial properties in the history of the NPI. As far as the other sectors are concerned, hotel was up 0.61%. Retail was up 0.90%. Apartments were strong at 3.62%. As I said, industrial was at 8.88% and office 1.44%. As far as energy is concerned, WTI spot crude prices averaged $66.19 a barrel during the quarter and ended the quarter at $73.52 a barrel. That was a 24% increase from the first quarter ending price, which was about $59.19 a barrel. That ramp up in pricing was driven by strong demand recovery, supply uncertainty, and continued underinvestment in the sector. Second quarter demand recovered to about 96 million barrels per day, which is 96% of pre-COVID demand of about 100 million barrels per day measured back in 2019. And demand is expected to fully recover to about 100 million barrels per day by the end of this year and could even surpass all-time highs by the second half of next year. Following the quarter end, OPEC Plus reached a compromise that opens the way for supply additions through the second half of this year. They declared their intention to roll back all of the April 2020 COVID crisis oil supply cuts by the end of 2022, and they believe global oil demand will have recovered to pre-crisis levels above 100 million barrels per day by then. They also confirmed a plan to add 400,000 barrels per day in supply beginning in August of this year, and monthly meetings will remain in place throughout the year and allow the additions to be slowed, halted, or even reversed if necessary. As far as gas is concerned, Henry Hub natural gas spot prices averaged $2.95 per million BTUs during the quarter. It ended the quarter at $3.79 per million BTUs. That was a 50% increase from the first quarter ending price of $2.52. Subsequent to quarter end, gas prices surged above $4 per million BTUs, a price that we last saw in fall of 2018. Heat and drought are the driving demand for increased gas-fired power generation. In addition, gas production has also stagnated recently, which could ultimately lead to inventory shortfalls this winter and even higher gas prices. Turning to the actual performance numbers on page 2 of your report, total NAV of the portfolio at the end of June was $4.978 billion. The portfolio itself was about $4.6 billion, of that, or 92%, and cash equivalent investments was just over $400 million at 8%. The performance for the portfolio was outstanding during the quarter. The gross return without cash was 6.87% versus 379 on the benchmark, and an outperformance of 308 basis points. The real estate sector of the portfolio was up just over 4% for the quarter. Infrastructure was up just under 1.5%, and energy was up a whopping 15.34% for the quarter. The one-year returns are outstanding at 16.26% on the portfolio versus 902 on the benchmark, so an outperformance of 724 basis points there. The one-year sector returns individually, energy had an incredible one-year return at June 30. One-year return was 30.6% on the energy portfolio. Infrastructure is 8.40%, and real estate 10.97%. Three-year returns are still slightly under the benchmark due to the energy hits that happened over the past couple of years, so that'll catch up in another year or so. We're at 427 versus 601 on the 3-year. But the 5-year and the 10-year were both really strong, 959 on the 5-year versus 621 on the benchmark, 338 basis point outperformance. 10-year, 12.46% on the portfolio versus 799 on the benchmark. So outperformed on the 10-year by 447 basis points. And then your policy return, which is a 5-year net of fees, the portfolio return is 7.54%. 5-year return net of fees versus 381 on the benchmark. So on your policy return, you're still up 373 basis points over the benchmark. As far as new investments during the quarter, as you can see on page 3 of the report, you approved 2 new fund investments, 1 new co-investment, and the expansion of 1 existing fund investment for a total of around $800 million. Subsequently to the second quarter, there were no new investments approved. As far as allocations are concerned, if you look at page 7 and page 8 of the report, on an NAV basis, which is an purely invested basis, allocation of real estate at the end of June was 28% versus a target of 33%. Infrastructure was at 35% versus a target of 36%, and energy was at 37% versus a target of 31%. Those allocation targets, as you know, reflect the new targets that you adopted in April of this year, and they're designed primarily to reduce the exposure in the portfolio to extreme levels of volatility that have been occurring in the energy sector. Over time, those allocations will become more aligned with the policy targets as you make more capital commitments in the various sectors and as more of the existing unfunded capital commitments become funded. On page 8, you can see the allocations on an invested plus unfunded commitments basis. Real estate was at 27% versus the 33% target. Infrastructure was at 37% versus the 36% target, and energy was at 36% versus the 31% target. As far as geographic diversification is concerned, if you look at page 11 and 12, you can see the allocation to the U.S. is about 94% of the portfolio compared to a target of 90%. The international allocation is around 6% compared to a target of 10%. And these allocation targets also reflect the new targets you adopted in April of this year. Turning to page 13 and 14 and looking at the investment manager exposure, as you can see, on a purely invested basis, we're well diversified across a platform of 25 different managers. The policy statement limits exposure to any one investment manager to no more than 20% of the total portfolio. At the end of June, we were well within that range. The top 5 highest exposures were to NCAP Energy at 12.27%, USAA Equity Advisors at 9.01%, NCAP Flat Rock Midstream 7.65%, Macquarie Infrastructure Partners 7.63%, and Clarion at 5.96%. The co-investment vehicles are grouped by manager and presented separately. The highest grouped co-investment exposure at the end of June were NCAP Flat Rock Midstream at 7.81%, followed by First Reserve at 5.68%, Intervest 3.44%, and BlackRock at 3.23%. That concludes my presentation. As I stated earlier, this is a non-voting item, but I'm very happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Rusty. Excellent report. Any questions from the board?
Nice returns.
You won't get many quarters to present those numbers in your lifetime.
Right.
Well,
Enjoy
we can
'em.
try. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
There are no further questions. There being no further business before the school land board, the meeting is hereby adjourned.